being conversation-wise is tied up based on the Lord. So they're talking about, and they're no different than us. And I heard their stories and their trials and what they went through, and boy, they're way worse than what I ever went through. But the joy in their souls just comes out everywhere they go in their conversation. They could be talking about just normal everyday stuff, but it's like, praise the Lord, thank God, and stuff like that. We'd go to a restaurant, pretty soon they'd be recruiting a waitress to come here, You need to come down to church, you need, they weren't bashful about it, but they weren't obnoxious about it either. Like, I had an uncle that got saved, and he drove everybody crazy. It was terrible. He was saved, but he had no love for anybody else that wasn't. You're going to hell. That's the way he was, and turned everybody off. But their lives were just built around God. They were just totally different. So how do you hear from the Lord? I'm always struggling with that question. How do you hear from God? How do you know it's God and not you? I come up with that idea of this worship summit about 9 months ago, and it's just an idea, and there was a lot of pain and effort and struggling and pushback. And is it God? Is it me? Is it Satan? Should we do this? Should we cancel it? It was just all kinds of problems to overcome, believe me. And then when I was standing here on Thursday night, and the first song out of their mouths, and the first chord he hit on the keyboard, this is of God. This is a blessing for this church. That's how I knew it. But I dug out a couple scriptures that everybody's familiar with. I'm sure I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but if you go to 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 18 and 19, do you have that back there, guys? 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 18 and 19. This is David, okay? And he's got a problem. Them old nasty Philistines are coming to make war on him. So he says, the Philistines also came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Is that how you pronounce it? Rephaim? It's also the valley of the giants. This is where Goliath lived. And it's an actual place. It still exists in Israel, obviously, because it's land. But it's a strategic valley, and I'm going to tell you a story about it. So go ahead to the next one. David asked the Lord, saying, listen, you want me to go up against these guys? And if you do, will you deliver them into my hand? And the Lord said, well, go, and I will surely deliver you. So he must have had a direct line to God, or they were using 2 tin cans and a string, because they were communicating. I don't think I've ever heard from God like that. Have any of you? Steve, Rich, George? I get impressions and I get thoughts, and I have to go and think and pray about it. Lord, is this you? Is this your will? Should I turn left? Should I turn right? I'll get an impression, but I've never had an audible word say, thus saith the Lord. I never had that. So anyway, put that back up there. Leave them up there until I tell you to turn them off, okay? Yeah, there you go. Got to give instructions. Okay, and he inquired of the Lord, will you deliver them? And the Lord said, go up, and I will surely deliver them into your hand. So go to the next verse, 2 Samuel, same chapter, verses 22 and 23, and leave them up there too. There you go. So anyway, David went up, he whooped up on the Philistines, took care of them, taking care of business. And then, evidently he didn't get them all because they regrouped. And this is still going on today, by the way. they regrouped and they come up again and spread themselves out in the same valley, okay? Because that valley is strategically located below Jerusalem to Egypt. And so it was a constant battle over that valley. It's a good place to fight because it was a valley, it was flat, it wasn't mountainous. Good place to put your army in. So go ahead to the next one. And David inquired of the Lord, and this time God said, you shall not go up. Why not? And I went up the last time, and you were with me. Why not? He says, God gives him a little strategy here. He says, go up around behind them and come upon them opposite the mulberry trees. Put the next one up. So he's got two different directions. And when you hear the sound of the marching in the tops of the trees, then bestir yourselves, in other words, go and attack, for the Lord has gone before you to smite the army of the Philistines. So this is a strategy that God laid out. Okay, so during the 6-day war in Israel, which was a mighty miracle anyway, so that's, the Old Testament and everything like that. I know that's old and God was working back then. But during the 6-day war, they had the same valley, only instead of Philistines, there were Egyptians, and Israelis were going up against them, and they were going to just go in head to head. And then one of the commanders of the army remembered this verse, and he changed the entire strategy of the Israeli army to, instead of attacking the Egyptians head on, they would go up around the mulberry trees and wait for them and lay in and attack them that way. And they were successful. So they were still using that, and it was amazing. And there's all kinds of miracles that happened during that war. The Israelis were marching into a town, and all the Arabs were celebrating. Yay, yay, here they come, here they come. The Israelis couldn't figure out, why aren't they fighting? Why aren't they fighting us, shooting at us and everything? They all had weapons, and the Israelis walked right into the town. The people, the entire town thought it was the Iraqi army coming. It wasn't. Another instance of God moving. There was 2 Israeli soldiers. All they had was rifles. There was an Egyptian half-track loaded with a platoon of soldiers all armed up. They came together, and the Israelis are going, they're shaking in their boots, saying, what do we do, what do we do? And said, well, point your gun at them, Here's a half-track. And it stopped, and they walked up, and all the Egyptians surrendered. And they said, why didn't you fire on us? He says, we couldn't move our arms. We couldn't move our arms. They laid them down and surrendered to 2 guys. One more miracle. There was a platoon of Israeli soldiers in the valley of Ephraim trying to get to a village. They got about 20% of the way through this field, and they found out they're in a minefield. And they had to get to the village before sunup, or they'd be exposed. So what do? To search out mines, take their bayonets and go one at a time to try and find a mine and disarm it. 10 minutes later, the night was clear, stars, moon. 10 minutes later, there was giant storm clouds that rolled in, and there was 80 to 100 mile an hour wind through that whole valley. And they hunkered down, they were getting blasted. But about 10 minutes later, when it was over and the sky cleared, every mine in that valley was uncovered. Every one of them. And they just walked right through it. It's all true. You can look it up just like I did. So God is still moving. God is still working. He's working today. He's working in this church. Go to 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 to verse 4. I'll give you an example of what I always do. Not always, but most of the time. Okay, when King David dwelt in the house of the Lord had given him rest from all his surrounding enemies, so he's taking it easy. Go ahead. King said to Nathan, the prophet, here's a guy, the prophet. It'd be like me going to Pastor George. I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells in the curtains. So David wants to build a house for the ark of God. And Nathan said to the king, yeah, go do what you want. Whatever's in your heart. You're the king. I'm the prophet. Go ahead. Knock yourself out. Do what you want. And go ahead. That night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan saying, one more time, go and tell my servant David, you shall, well, anyway, it's a long verse, but what he's saying is, he told David, you will not build the temple for the Ark of the Covenant. Where the day before he said, go do what you want. And then the word of the Lord came to Nathan the prophet and said, don't do it. So there's three examples. He went to God. God said, go and I'll be with you. Second time he went to God, God changed the strategy. The third time he went, he was given permission from the bishop or the pope, whatever you want to call him, and it was wrong. So we need to seek the Lord, test the spirits, wait upon the Lord, because timing is the key part, wouldn't you say? It's timing. It's God's timing. That's the other thing that I noticed about that group that was here last week. I run on the clock. Baby, when it's 12 o'clock, it's time to eat lunch. 5 o'clock, supper better be on the table. I got an appointment at 10 o'clock, I better be there. It's the way I've always been. It's the way I always will be. They don't run like that. If they're ministering to somebody, it doesn't matter what time it is. It doesn't matter when lunch is. It doesn't matter, drives me crazy. People like that drive me nuts, but they're so focused on their call, whatever God has on their hearts at that particular time, that's what they do. And the heck with everything else. I'm talking to you. I'm ministering to you. Where you need prayer? I got 5 minutes. Can we make it a hurry time? That's the way I am. I don't know. Maybe some of you guys can relate to that. I don't know. But so where do we go from here? What can we do? What can we change? I'm just going to work on myself, and you all work on yourselves, and we'll be good to go. So that's about it for me. Yes, sir.
The last thing that you started saying about the way that Jonathan and them, they were on the Lord's time. They weren't on their own time. I was walking the neighborhood the other day, and a woman was out in the front with her dog, and, how are you? How are you? I said, I'm getting ready to go home to lunch. She says, oh, us old people, we love breakfast, we love lunch, we love dinner. And it's got to be boom, boom, boom. Well, I'm kind of like that too, unless I get on the Lord's time. And then things kind of start disappearing of the world. I used to work in a bank in Newark, New Jersey. It was a very snowy day. The buses were running 2 to 3 hours late. So we were all frozen at the bus stop. And there was this guy who always rode the bus with me and always was talking about Jesus. And wouldn't you know that probably 15 minutes before that bus came, he started ministering to somebody and witnessing to somebody on the sidewalk next to me. And that bus came finally, and we all got on it except him. And he walked away with that person continuing to witness. And I'm freaking out on his behalf. I'm like, he's going to miss the bus. There's not another bus coming. This is a horrible night. Lord, what's going to happen to him? And I was a Christian. And he taught me that day. I don't know what happened to him. If you know Newark, that's not the place you just walk away with somebody. You get your bus and you go home. But he did, because he must have been completely caught up in the presence of the Lord. Completely. So I know exactly what you're talking. I never forgot that. That was 50 years ago. I never forgot it. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I hope a little bit of what I said here kind of makes sense and y'all can relate to it. And it's almost 12 o'clock, and you know what that means.